Our guest today is Jonathan McConnell, and Jonathan is a Republican candidate for the United States Senate. Thank you for taking the time to come by and talk to us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
To begin with, give me some background about yourself.
Well, I grew up in Mobile. I went to Davidson High School, and then I went to Auburn University for undergrad. I received a degree in business administration, and then I joined the Marine Corps. I was an infantry officer with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. I deployed twice to Iraq, first time on the outskirts of Fallujah, pre-surge, and then we did a push from the outskirts of Fallujah to the outskirts of Ramadi during the surge, and then came home for 6 months and then went right back over to the Syrian border. Spent a 7-month deployment out on the Syrian border as a weapons company, mobile assault company. There had an area about the size of Vermont. We were about 55 miles from our nearest friendly unit, which was kind of nice. The autonomy was good. We may not have had much supervision, but we didn't have showers either, so it was kind of a trade-off. But then I came home and literally checked out of the Marine Corps in 2 weeks, drove through the night, and started law school at the University of Alabama the next day. It was quite the transition. But while I was in law school is when the Maersk, Alabama was hijacked. A lot of people remember that story from the movie Captain Phillips. And I was watching with the rest of the world as that was happening. And I was like, why are we not guarding these ships? So I actually ended up starting a security company that defends ships off the coast of Somalia. I've been doing that for the last 6.5 years. It's been an incredible opportunity. We're licensed in 38 ports throughout the world. But the problem is that we're not getting any safer as a country. And I've seen the results of radical Islam on 3 different continents, on both sides of Africa, in the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. We are not winning this war. We're not even addressing the issue about this global jihad movement. That's why I'm running. We have 2 roles of the federal government. Number 1 is to provide an economic environment that promotes the American dream, and the American dream being that we leave a legacy for our kids that's better off than what we have it. And number 2 is to keep us safe. And the majority of Americans feel we're failing at both of those. It's time for change. It's time to have bold elected leaders in Washington, D.C. who are not only going to stand up to Obama every day, but stand up to Mitch McConnell and the Republican establishment that has been complicit in bankrupting this country.
Jonathan, I am assuming from your background, this is your first time to run for political office.
It is. It is.
And why did you decide to jump right in the Senate race?
Well, one, I think Richard Shelby's been there for a very long time. You ask, how are we better off now than we were 37 years ago? $700 billion in debt is what we started with, and now we're at $19 trillion with no end in sight. We need people who are going to stand up. When people say, hey, you can't have that much influence as a first-term senator, then I would say, well, how about Senator Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, or Barack Obama? All people who are passionate leaders, or who were passionate leaders. But look at what we have with Richard Shelby. Is he standing up to Obama every day? No. No one believes that every single day. No one believes that. We need someone who truly is going to get up there and fight. And once again, not just fight Obama, but fight for what's right. Fight against the Republican establishment who is, part of the problem.
In addition to protecting the country, if elected, what else could we expect out of you?
Well, the number one thing is having the moral courage to make the tough decisions. In the Marine Corps, that's one of the leadership principles they teach us is moral courage. To even when it doesn't feel like the popular decision, but to make the right decision. We've got to cut our spending. We had that opportunity this fall. We had the opportunity this fall that the Senate did when they passed the omnibus bill. They had the opportunity to cut a simple cut, which would have been keep people from collecting Social Security disability while also collecting federal unemployment. Those are mutually exclusive. If you're disabled, you can't work. Why are you dipping out of both pots? Well, we didn't do it. That's a common sense measure that obviously common sense is not a common virtue in Washington, D.C. That's a common sense measure we could have done, but we didn't. Those tough decisions, if we can't make the easy decisions, we can't make the tough decisions. If I'm in Washington, D.C., you'll see us making some tough cuts, and they're going to be hard, but our domestic spending is out of control. 51% of our budget right now is domestic spending. We've got to cut that because right now it's on a trajectory to be $220 trillion by 2030. And that's just a guess because you know what? Some scientists came up with that or some research person. We've got to get our spending under control. We've got to get our economy back up and running. The way that we do that is to stop our number 1 export. Right now our number 1 export is jobs. And the reason that is because we have onerous regulations that we put on businesses, small businesses and corporations. We have one of the highest corporate tax rates in this country. And yet we are expecting corporations to stay here. No, they're all going overseas. Let's cut our corporate tax rate down to nothing. Where it all passes through and it comes into what people spend. So let's go either with a federal, if we go with a flat tax or a fair tax. I'm largely agnostic between the two. But if you cut our corporate income tax down to 0, you got rid of the IRS, the onerous regulations that they create. Because right now our tax code is so complex, it creates a license to steal. You get rid of both of those, I think you would watch this country would flourish, because we would unleash the innovativeness of the American people.
I was just thinking that if you try to change the tax structure, the big businesses that put a lot of money into campaigns are going to be against that because they get so many breaks.
Yep.
Can it really be done?
It has to be done. Because right now, you're exactly right. The big businesses that put all the money into the campaigns, you're essentially investing. By those big businesses are investing in politicians to cut out little, language and regulations that's going to benefit them. That's wrong. Everyone is supposed to be created equal. There's no business that's too big to fail. We've got to stop this crony capitalism that we've created. A lot of people say that, Liberia may be the most corrupt country in this world. It's a lot of time, I think it's America. You know why? Because our corruption is so complicated to do it, but it's so effective. It's got to stop. And where does it stop? It stops today. It's going to stop March 1st. We elect Jonathan McConnell over Richard Shelby.
When you started campaigning, and I know you've talked to a lot of people over the last several months, have they brought up any issues that kind of surprised you that you weren't expecting that voters are interested in?
We'd done a lot of research, and I'd looked at it. A lot of people, the two concerns that people have are one, the economy, and two is keeping us safe. And the fact that Richard Shelby fails at both of those is pretty encouraging to us. A lot of people, I did not realize the backlash that was out there against Shelby and his buildings. A lot of people have a lot of apathy for the fact that he's got 6 buildings that are worth over $250 million in concrete. And how does that, for all the bacon that Richard Shelby brings home, how many people does that truly affect? It's about less than 1% of the population. When you build that building in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham and Mobile, all throughout the state, when you build those buildings, you create an asset, but it's also a liability, because that asset, you create those jobs for a little while, but first of all, the government doesn't create jobs, small businesses create jobs. So now we've created this $250 million that we spend in Richard Shelby's buildings, but now I've never seen a government building empty. I've also never seen a government building that's not cold in the summer and hot in the winter. So you're talking about the utilities that we're paying on all these different things. At what point do we say stop the madness? Someone's got to be the grown-up here. Someone's got to make the tough cuts, say let's get our spending under control, and set the standard for accountability. Richard Shelby has not done that in 37 years. It's time for some change.
Anything else we need to touch on before we wrap up?
I just think that we have a unique opportunity here. We have an opportunity to we want change in this country. 81% of the vote in this state right now is going to Trump, Cruz, or Carson. Those are all change agents. They're outsiders. Are people in Alabama going to negate their vote by voting for the quintessential politician, the status quo, which is represented by Richard Shelby? I hope not. I hope that they will invest in the future. Someone who's got new ideas, who's going to set the standard for accountability and, frankly, be the grown-up and cut spending. And that's what I hope they do on March 1st.
March 1st, the primary election.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much.
Jonathan McConnell, Republican candidate for the Senate. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
All right. Good job.